Hey there, Heather Ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 video. And today we are going to be doing the top 10 F1 racing moments in Canada. Not Canadian drivers, but moments of the Canadian Grand Prix. And this video is sponsored by the Jacques Villeneuve book, My First Year in Formula One, which I got to read and all that. So that's just basically my sponsor for this video. So the Canadian Grand Prix has been a big moment on the F1 calendar. I mean, you rarely see races in North America, but yet, and you don't know how North America responds to F1 racing, whereas, we have IndyCar and NASCAR. But in a lot of sense, you got to know that Canadians just love Formula One and all that. I mean, we haven't had much luck with drivers in Formula One. Lance Stroll has been off and on. The Tiffy has been basically known as a Nepo baby. Well, Gilles Villeneuve is iconic, and so was Jacques Villeneuve. But other than that, like, where is the Canadian F1 driving prowess? Not much. But Canada got to host one. From 1967 to current day, there's been a Canadian Grand Prix. Actually, not all the time. There have been years that the Canadian Grand Prix has been canceled, some of it due to COVID. But anyway, let's look at 10 moments from the race. Number 10 was the four-way finish in 2000. So the 2000 edition had a breathtaking finish and all that. They had four fantastic drivers: Michael Schumacher for Ferrari, Rubens Barrichello for Brazil, Giancarlo Fisichella from Italia, and David Coulthard from the UK. Was shooting for Germany. They're all battling each other tooth and nail and all that. And after the previous year's finish, it was just amazing on that. Schumi survived and all that. Number 9 is the controversial win of Lewis Hamilton in 2019. The last Canadian Grand Prix pre-COVID was amazing and all that. Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton were battling tooth and nail and all that. And Sebastian Vettel actually won the race in 2019. However, he got penalized 5 seconds for rejoining the track unsafely and forcing Lewis Hamilton off. You can't really do that. When you join the track, you have to join in a safe line and all that. Then you can go chase. But it was unsafely and forced Lewis Hamilton off. If he had not forced Hamilton off, I doubt the penalty would have happened. Worst of all, that brought Vettel to second and Lewis Hamilton won. Vettel would switch the position boards in protest and all that. It was just like, it seemed petulant, but the racing rules were there. I mean, you can't force someone off. Number 8 was the race that never was in 1973. The Canadian Grand Prix before its current location on Ile Notre Dame was at Mosport Park in Toronto, and it was run in treacherous conditions and all that. Rain and fog would cause chaos. Obviously, I mean, courses run in the rain would be terrible, and fog and all that would hurt too. Half the field actually had to crash in the inclement weather, and there was a lot of controversy between timing and scoring and all that. So, we'll take a closer look at this. So, yeah, it was race 14, September 1973. It would be Peter Revson's last win in Formula One. And this would actually be the last Grand Prix to win by an American driver. And all that. This was actually the last race start for Jackie Stewart, who retired. Well, he was a third-time world champion, but he retired after this. It was in wet conditions and all of that. So Peter Revson won with Emerson Fittipaldi taking second and Jackie Oliver third. J.P. Beltoise of France fourth. Jackie Stewart took fifth and Howden Gainley took sixth. Lots of people crashed and all that. There were no Canadians in this thing. So that was just pure imagination and all of that. Number 7 is the crash of Robert Kubica from Poland, 2007. It was humongous. The 2007 Grand Prix saw Robert Kubica in his BMW Sauber crash at 300 kilometers per hour, somersaulting across the circuit and slamming into the barriers. It was a frightening scene in Montreal and all that. Akin to 1982 when um, the one of the drivers, I would say Patrici, but no, I don't think it was Patrici who died. There was a driver who died in 1982 at the start when his car stalled and someone crashed into the back of it. But yeah, it was terrifying. But the good news for Kubica is he only had a sprained ankle and a concussion. And if it wasn't for the F1 safety advances in 2007, he would have been toast. Strange as it sounds, Kubica the next year in 2008, I originally thought it was 2011 when he did this, but he ended up winning the race in 2008. And his only F1 victory was in Montreal at the course that the previous year he crashed. He had a massive story of resilience and redemption. Number 6 is a new era in the Canadian Grand Prix in 1978. Well, obviously, the actual race does make the top 5, but this is just the fact that it was in Montreal. Montreal constructed a brand new race circuit on Ile Notre Dame. Ile Notre Dame was not a natural island in Montreal. It was actually built to attract people to Expo 67, when the World's Fair Expo actually what meant something in 1967 in Montreal. Of course, that's where, the different provinces had the pavilions, and the Stanley Cup was in the Ontario Pavilion all this time because it was won by the Leafs. But anyway, 1978, they decided to go to Ile Notre Dame for the Canadian Grand Prix instead of Mosport Park or even Mount Tremblant. It was just amazing to see that you could you could make a man-made island and put Expo 67 in there, and then you could have the Formula One Grand Prix. So that was huge. Number 5 is Jean Alesi's only Grand Prix win in 1995. Jean Alesi was a pretty good driver for many teams back in the 80s and 90s, but he never won a race. And everyone was like, will he ever win a race? After years of near misses and heartbreak, he finally won a race as a Ferrari driver, which is even more shocking. They allowed him to play Ferrari. Ferrari loved him. Jean Alesi was from France, and Montreal is mostly francophone. And Alesi in his car 27, which actually was the same car number as Gilles Villeneuve, who of course died in that crash in 1982 in Belgium. He crossed the line, and it was amazing what he could do to finally win the race, finally win a race, and to do it in Montreal, and everyone cheered for him. Number 4 is Lewis Hamilton's first Formula One win in 2007. Hamilton's meteoric rise was confirmed at the 2007 Grand Prix, Canadian Grand Prix. He was a rookie in 2007. Lewis Hamilton was once upon a time. So it's been 18 years since he was an F1 race, a rookie. In his 6th race, he won the pole position, meaning he would start first off the grid in Montreal and had an assured victory. There was a lot of there were multiple safety cars, including the one that had to be done because of Kubica's accident. Lewis Hamilton's composure and speed shone through. He was the arrival of a future legend. This was his first ever race win. So that's amazing how good Lewis Hamilton has been in Formula One history. And this was where it all started in Montreal. Number 3 is Jenson Button's victory in the longest F1 race around in 2011. The 2011 Grand Prix had the most thrilling in F1 history. There were collisions. Jenson Button ended up getting a massive drive-through penalty, and they had to have 6 pit stops in tricky, wet, dry conditions. The rain caused havoc, but they still kept the race going for a little bit. Jenson Button, who is known for being a good British driver, but basically being on crappy teams and being part of a crappy livery, if you will, actually ended up doing great And in the race's dying moments on the final lap, because there is no time limits, sometimes there's time limits, but there was no time limit, Jenson Button's epic victory happened as he overtook Sebastian Vettel on the final lap to claim victory after more than 4 hours. It was amazing what he could do. Jenson Button actually was was he the 2007 or was it the 2009 F1 champion? But yeah, it was amazing and all that. That the Canadian Grand Prix in 2011 had all this stuff going on. Number 2 is the Wall of Champions, 1999. The reason why it's called the World Wall of Champions at the final chicane, before the start finish line, is because of the fact that it caught 3 people hitting that wall. Damon Hill was the first former world champion to hit the wall. Damon Hill, the 1996 champion, who beat Jacques Villeneuve by a few points, did it, and he crashed into the wall. And then, second of all, when Michael Schumacher, well, everyone must be cheering because, Michael Schumacher is a dickwad sometimes. So Michael Schumacher crashed into the wall. Second of all, the 94 champion. And the 97 champion, Jacques Villeneuve, crashed into the wall. Unfortunately, in his home Grand Prix, too, which made it even worse. So that's why the wall was now called the Wall of Champions. And at number 1 was when Jacques Villeneuve, well, his father Gilles, won his first F1 race on home soil. We had lots of people winning their first races, or first and only races. Like Kubica won his first ever race in Montreal. So too did Lewis Hamilton and John Lacey, but Gilles Villeneuve did so first. It was amazing and all that because, Montreal had a new race course for the F1 and all that, and it was amazing and all that. The Quebecois driver sent the Montreal crowd into raptures. It inspired a nation from racing, and Montreal named it in his honor. Well, Montreal would have named it in his honor anyhow, deaf or no deaf. But yeah, Gilles Villeneuve won the race in Montreal in 1978. The first time it was on Ile Notre Dame, and then 4 years later, after his death, they named the circuit after him. And you proved that Canadian drivers can win F1 races after all. I mean, I feel bad for Lance Stroll and Latifi. They'd never have won. So, he's the only Canadian that matters in F1 history, I guess. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond at Do.